She's a retired police officer with federal disaster training. She was pressed into service to work 9/11 at the World Trade Center and also the TWA Flight 800 disaster. She's here to tell her experiences. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Remember when news was free? Be sure to check out the Newsbreak app. It's free. And be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Newsbreak is your #1 local news app for current events. Free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free. And be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. That's the free Newsbreak app. Be sure to look for and follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast. Joining us from Arizona, we have Stacy Goodman on the phone. Stacy is a retired Suffolk County, New York police officer with federal disaster training. She was thrust into the heart of the 9/11 investigation at World Trade Center, also TWA Flight 800 disaster. We'll talk about that. She's author of the book, The Dust Never Settles. Go to her website, stacygoodmanbook.com. Stacy, #1, thanks for your service. #2, thanks for being a guest on the show. Very much appreciated.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And one of the things that I love about this show is I'm a retired police, and you know the drill. We never have a platform to tell our stories, and the news media butchers what happens. And nowadays, so much of it is led by bias. It's not even close to the truth. We don't get to hear from the people that were on scene doing these things, and people really don't have an idea of the impact it has on them. Secondly, and to be totally honest, you break a lot of the so-called stereotypes about law enforcement officers, which I love.
Oh, thank you.
Well, when I was a police, and I started in 1980, we had male, female, gay, lesbian, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu. We had every walk of life you can imagine in police work, and no one cared. We didn't care at all. Yeah, we teased each other, but the media make it sound like we're a very closed society and we're not open to other people. So I'm so glad you're here to tell your story. You started off as a cop in Suffolk County. That's in Long Island, New York, correct?
Yes, I started out I was sworn in October of 1995, and I was one of only 6 females that entered the academy, and only 5 of us graduated. And we were, divided up between the precincts. We were all separated. They didn't put 2 females in one precinct, because there was so few females. They wanted to spread us out. And I was sent to the 4th precinct, which was Smithtown precinct. And that's where I began my training.
Funny thing is that 1995, I don't know if it's just me, doesn't seem like that long ago. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was.
So you hit the streets as a young cop, and I want to use the term cop. I want people to understand that's a compliment from me. I'm very funny when people outside police work use that term. I don't like it so much. When we use it with each other, I prefer it. So you were a young officer, and you were out in the streets doing everything the police do.
Yes, I was, unlike some of the other people that were in my academy class, I had no previous experience. A lot of people that were in the academy class were veterans or had come from other law enforcement agencies like the NYPD. So they had plenty of experience and skills, if you will, from other departments. And I was kind of like a true rookie in the sense that I had no previous experience, only my street smarts and, whatever experience I had from past jobs. And I was one of the older ones in the academy. I was 29. I actually celebrated my 30th birthday in the academy. And that was considered at the time very old to be in the academy. But, I made it through the physical and the mental and the educational portion, which Suffolk County was one of the toughest in that regard.
Yeah, making it through the background investigation is no joke. I think, by the way, you're right. 30 is old in the academy. I was the exact opposite. I was 21, and I was a relative baby. But I, very similar to you, I didn't come from a military background. I had no police experience. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't sure if I had the mental and physical toughness to do this job.
Yeah, the interesting thing is I wasn't sure either, so I volunteered with the auxiliary police to see, if I would even enjoy that kind of work. And I loved it a lot. And I actually, funny thing, my forte became traffic control. So much so that the Nassau County Police Department had, because we had to go, as auxiliaries, we had to go through the academy on an abbreviated, there was no real physical, it was more, learning the laws and learning what you could do as a civilian, because you were still a civilian, even though you were going to be assisting the police, and you had uniforms, and we would help with a lot of traffic control. And they appreciated me so much, they actually had the rookies come out when we had big events like at Nassau Coliseum, and they would actually assign a couple of rookies to me because I was so good at traffic control. It just happened to be one of my fortes.
And I got to tell you, to be totally honest, the one thing I hated the most out of police work was traffic control, directing traffic. Nothing tested my patience like directing traffic.
Yeah, most people didn't like it, and nothing personal, but mostly the guys didn't like it. They wanted to be where the real action was, and I didn't care. I'm like, well, this is what you're going to pay me to do. I'll do it. I enjoyed, dealing with people who weren't committing crimes for a change. So, yeah, I kind of actually enjoyed it.
And then you got into a federal disaster training. Before we go to break, can you explain what that was?
Yes, that came about from my previous job with the Red Cross. I came into the police department with the knowledge of training on or tabletop exercises to deal with plane disasters, other man-made disasters, and I ended up dealing with TWA Flight 800, that terrible tragedy that happened on Long Island in July of 1996, and I ended up working with the medical examiner. I was actually pushed to to do work at the ME's office, and that came about because Suffolk County did something very interesting when you were hired. They actually had you give them your previous skills before coming into the police department. And so they knew about my previous training with the Red Cross, and that I specialized in plane disasters. So my lieutenant said, you're going to work at the ME's office because you've had this kind of training previously. And I was sent over there and had a lovely conversation with the medical examiner over there. One day I had to drive him down to Mauritius, where the parts of the plane were being pulled out of the ocean, and we got to talking, and I told him how I wanted to be a medical examiner when I was younger, but I wasn't smart enough. Basically, my chemistry skills were not there.
Right.
And so he found that interesting, and we ended up hitting it off, and he got permission to have me pulled to the back of the morgue as opposed to being in front of the morgue where I was doing security with other officers. So I was sent to the back, and my it kind of took off from there.
We are going to take a short break. We're talking with Stacey Goodman. We return. We're going to talk about her experience investigating TWA Flight 800, then the World Trade Center. This is the Law Enforcement Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Are you over 70 with a life insurance policy you no longer need or can't afford to keep? You can turn it into cash. Get more information with no obligation at letsavings.com. That's letsavings.com, letsavings.com, or call 866-480-4252. Again, that's 866-480-4252.
Return our conversation with Stacey Goodman on the Law Enforcement Show. Stacey is a retired Suffolk County, Long Island, New York police officer with federal disaster training. She worked at the mayhem of the World Trade Center during the 9/11 terror attack, also TWA Flight 800, and she's authored the book Dust Never Settles. Get more information about her, the book, at StacyGoodmanBook.com. Before we went to break, Stacey, we started talking about TWA Flight 800. And I got to say this, the ME's office, the medical examiner's office, we were supposed to go see an autopsy as part of the police academy experience. And for whatever reason, that didn't happen that day. I, to this day, am relieved. I saw enough blood, guts, and gore in my lifetime that I hope to never see it again. As a matter of fact, I've become such a wimp watching TV. When there's any type of certain scenes involving pain or blood or guts, I have to cover my eyes. My wife laughs at me.
Yeah, well, when you see it raw on the street, it has one. I feel it has one emotional pulling, but when you see it in the ME's office, where it's under controlled, sterile lighting, and it's more of an educational and less violent feel to it, if you will. That's my personal take on it.
And it's a great way of explaining it. I never thought of differentiating the two, and my career lasted 11 years. Without going into details of my career, I was severely dinged up and still am to some degree or another when it comes to the after effects of everything you experience in police work. And I didn't go through what you went through with TWA Flight 800 and the World Trade Center. So I can't even really begin to imagine the depth of seeing all this stuff. And I want to focus on TWA Flight 800. You talked about driving to the scene or pulling parts of the plane out. I remember this. And there was a lot of things in the news. I think the report was initially that they thought a missile was fired at the plane, and that's what took it down and cost all those lives, correct?
Yeah, and Nelson DeMille wrote a book about it. There's a lot of theories out there on what actually happened, but I saw the plane after they pieced it together, and the metal, the skin, if you will, of the plane was flouring out, which means that the explosion came from within the plane. And that, I believe, was caused, they determined that it was an oxygen tank, and now there are very rigorous regulations on how oxygen tanks can be transported via aircraft. So those are things that, that came out after that plane disaster. But yeah, when I started working there, I was just a rookie. I was literally ripped from field training, thrown into, basically doing security work at the ME's office, because the Suffolk County Medical Examiner's office, not a tremendously large facility, but one of the best in the country. These medical professionals, best in the country. Aside from the New York City Medical Examiner's Office, which probably is the best in the country. But going on from that, based on my past training, they had experts, divers from the NYPD and from a multitude of other agencies reconstructing this plane, doing investigations, doing the real hard work. I basically was doing security work at the medical examiner's office, and I got to drive the chief medical examiner around for a couple of days, and ended up working with him in the back. And as they would bring the bodies in, we would check them in. Nothing like super crazy, but I actually, it was a privilege to have served with him back there, and got quite the education, on how sneaky the media could try to be, where they were dressing up as like priests and trying to get in there just to get a story.
They were dressing up like priests to get into the medical examiner's office for a news story.
Correct.
I know this sort of stuff. You know this sort of stuff. The vast majority of Americans don't understand how sneaky they are, and they want to be first. And they don't care how accurate or inaccurate the information is. They just want to get something and have some sort of source. So they'll pull anything they can to do that. And it's about making money.
Right. Yeah, and it's not, there was no, the ME, of course, showed the ultimate respect both for the remains and for the families. There were families that were impacted.
How many people perished in that flight?
200 plus. I don't know the exact number.
Right.
But it was over 200. And there were a lot of children on that flight.
That's the thing that gets me, Stacey, is they're so rushed. There's such a big rush to report. They lose sight of the fact quite often that you've got human lives and a lot of pain and despair for family members and survivors. And you know what brought that home? We'll talk about it a little bit later on. Was all the people after 9/11 with the photos. Have you seen so and so? Have you? It still tears part of me when I see that. I see old news reports or I see old film footage. I want to go back to TWA Flight 800. All these, and I'll use the term conspiracy theories. How do you deal with them when you know the evidence, when you saw firsthand what was going on, you were an investigator on scene? How do you deal with people that make these crazy, crazy claims?
You know what? I've learned to just not even have a conversation. If you want to hear what I have to say because I was there, great. If you want to believe what you want to believe, knock yourself out. I'm not going to change your mind anymore. I'm not even going to try. Life's too short. You know, it really is. People have been so basically brainwashed by what's been going on that they'll believe what they see on the TV instead of saying, that's an interesting theory. Let me look into that. You know, we used to be taught to think for ourselves and find our own answers. We had to, you remember when we were kids, we had to go to the library and, you know, look in the encyclopedia for information. We had to research. Now people just click a button and go, okay, that must be the truth because it's on the
I saw it on the internet. I saw it on Facebook. It's got to be factual.
Right. And it's not.
No, and the thing is, there's no shortage of people, and so many of these conspiracy theories have been proven to be false, inaccurate. And without going into a lot of details, I have a good friend. He's telling me, listen, I don't pay federal income taxes. I read a book. And I'm thinking to myself, are you out of your mind? Do you know what's going to... It's like the sovereign citizens. Oh, I don't have to do this because I'm a sovereign citizen and I read it in a book or I saw it on the internet. Yeah. TWA Flight 800, I've seen the reports. I've seen the claims. I still see people that are rabid about saying it didn't occur or it was a deliberate attack by the government for some inane reason.
Right.
And it just, my hat's off to you that you are better at containing yourself than I am, maybe because I haven't had to deal with it. This is the Law Enforcement Today show. We are talking with Stacey Goodman. What a story Stacey has. She is a retired police officer from Suffolk County, New York, which is in Long Island. She had federal disaster training and was drafted into the TWA Flight 800 investigation. Also, the terror attack at the 9/11 terror attack at the World Trade Center. When we return, we're going to talk more about those incidents, her book, and much more. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Got questions about your Medicare coverage? Who doesn't? Take a few moments to get real answers and options, all for free. Call 866-427-1225. 866-427-1225. 866-427-1225. Or visit lethealthy.com, lethealthy.com, lethealthy.com to learn more.
I'm going to let you in a little secret that's been a game changer for me with social media. You can get details at letpops.com. So redirect, letpops.com. It's called Chatbots. They're Meta partners, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram, WhatsApp, and soon to be TikTok. You can turn those people that visit and engage with your content on social media into consumers and then sometimes customers, and you can market to them. Get details. Best of all, you can get started for free. letpops.com. That's letpops.com. Again, it's letpops.com. This is Law Enforcement Show. Return our conversation with Stacey Goodman. Stacey is a retired Suffolk County, New York police officer. Also, she had federal disaster training and Red Cross experience, which got her involved in TWA Flight 800 investigation. Also, on scene at the World Trade Center terror attack on 9/11 and for several days after. She's author of the book, The Dust Never Settles. Get more information about her and her book online, StaceyGoodmanBook.com. Stacey, I want to go towards New York, the World Trade Center. Yeah, I've had guests on that were at the Pentagon. We forget that a lot. people at Shanksville, Pennsylvania, I believe it's called, where the plane went down. We forget about them quite often. We were dominated, and I don't mean in a bad way, by World Trade Center reports. And I was watching it when it occurred. And a very quick story. I wound up going to New York several years later, and I went by the disaster site, and they were starting construction there. And there was several New York police there doing security details, answering questions, whatever. And I wanted to go up to them, Stacey, and say, I'm a retired Baltimore police sergeant. Hey, my respects, all that sort of stuff. And as I approached him, I broke down in tears. Because to this day, I still can't imagine losing that many officers, that many firefighters, that many civilians in one incident. I can't wrap my head around that.
Well, if you can't wrap your head around that, try wrapping your head around this. And I don't mean to sound like, but this is fact. There are more people that have died after 9/11 from 9/11 related cancers and illnesses than actually died on 9/11.
Yeah. Yeah,
and that's sad. Nobody reports that.
No.
Nobody talks about that.
So many of these first responders that were there, and I don't mean just first responders, construction workers as well, the hard hat crews, all those people, so many of them died of horrible cancers, and they died slow, tremendously painful deaths that had no respect for their humanity, none whatsoever. Right.
Agreed.
Yeah, the whole thing. How many years has it been? I'm still troubled by it.
It's almost 21 years. This September will be 21 years.
I don't want to belabor that because I might start sobbing on the radio, and it's really not cool when this grown man. I don't cry well anyway. So you had been involved in TWA Flight 800. How did you get involved into President service for the World Trade Center?
Well, while I was after I had met all these wonderful medical professionals, they invited me to join up with this. At the time, it was under Health and Human Services. It was called DMORT, which stands for another government wonderful acronym. It stands for Disaster Mortuary Operational Response Team, which is mostly made up of medical professionals who basically volunteer their time and their skills to assist during man-made and natural disasters. And they go all across the country, for hurricanes and plane crashes and whatever would happen all across the country and even the world if they were asked. So I got involved, and the government gives you training, and you purchase your uniforms through them. It's a non-paid, it's an all-volunteer. So in my unit, I was the only police officer. So I was a logistics coordinator since I didn't have any medical training. So my job, I thought, was just going to be to assist the medical examiner in any way, shape, or form that he needed, whether he needed more supplies, I would find out how to get them, or what have you. Do whatever he needed, move a table, clean a room, whatever. So when I got activated for 9/11, I got the call, and I was asked to pack my bag and respond. So I called up the precinct. Now I was still a young cop, had only 6 years on the job, and I called my sergeant and I told him what I was doing. I said, put me out on vacation time, put me out on sick leave, whatever you got to do, but this is where I'm going to be for at least the next couple of weeks, if not longer. So the department actually continued to pay me. I was granted permission leave where the county executive had authorization. He made an executive order allowing me to get paid and work at Ground Zero as a sort of like on loan to the federal government. So I was actually working with the federal government, a sworn-in temporary federal agent, and I was being paid by the police department. And I worked down there with DMORT, and my job, I later found out when I got down there, was to basically assist the medical examiner. And once they started bringing in the remains, we had set up right on the pile. A lot of people ask me what the pile is. The pile was the term that was used for the 1.8 million tons of debris that was left after the towers fell. And it wasn't just the World Trade Center towers. 1.8 million tons of debris. And it wasn't just the two twin towers, because the World Trade Center was a center of buildings. And the Marriott had a small hotel there. I say small, 22 stories, 23 stories, thereabouts, which obviously was, shadowed by these beautiful towers that were 110 stories each. So when they came down, it destroyed the hotel, which was, I believe, building number 3. The towers were building 1, 2, and there was about 7 or 8 buildings that were in the World Trade Center complex. So,
and how long were you on scene?
I was there for 23 days. I worked 7 days a week, 12-hour shifts. We broke up into 2 groups. I was the 7 p.m. to the 7 a.m. shift. They said, "Oh, you're a police officer. You could do nights." I'm like, I'd never done an overnight in my life.
I hate midnight shifts. I hate midnight shifts. I have nightmares about them.
But the great thing was, because you work in 7 days a week, it was very easy to get my body into that routine, because it was the same thing every day. It was the same 12 hours. It wasn't like I was off for a couple of days trying to deal with daylight and then going back to nights. It was continual. So it was very easy to get my body into that rhythm. It was very hard when I left to get my body out of that rhythm.
Right.
But
well, I got to ask this. There's really no easy way to ask this, because a part of your task, your job there had to be to identify the best of your ability and to keep track of human remains. And again, I don't know how to ask this. Are you able to talk about that?
Oh, yeah. Some of it I can talk about. There are certain things I'm not allowed to talk about, but some of it I can talk about. Just like I had, in doing the book, I had to be very careful. There are certain things that the government has forbade me to talk about. So basically, what I was sworn in as a temporary federal agent, and when they started, we had set up right next to the pile. So when the guys on the pile, mostly firefighters and other workers, and police officers, obviously, brought remains to us, they had to be logged in. Somebody logged them in, and they were treated with the utmost respect. And I'll never forget the first time the medical examiner looked at me and goes, "Well, this is a federal crime scene, and you were sworn in as a temporary federal agent." And at the time, I know this sounds silly, I was like the highest ranking, like police officer, because I was a temporary federal agent. So they actually assigned a city lieutenant to me.
I'll bet that was
over that.
Uncomfortable. We're going to take a short break. We're talking with Stacey Goodman, retired Suffolk County, New York police officer. Also, a lot of federal disaster training. She was drafted to work at the World Trade Center during the terror attack or afterwards. Also, TWA Flight 800 disaster. She's authored the book, The Dust Never Settles. Get more details about her, the book, at her website, StaceyGoodmanBook.com. This is the Law Enforcement Show. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back.
What could you do with an extra $500 to $5,000 a month or more? All earned from the comfort of your home or business, and all with Facebook. Meta is paying people just like you every month. They are earning tens of thousands of dollars, and so can you. Learn how to create another revenue stream from Meta and dramatically increase your reach, all without breaking your own time bank. Sign up for a free membership at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Don't you hate when they do the bait and switch on you? When they tell you, check out a website, and it's free to go there, and then there's hidden charges? You won't find any of that nonsense at our website, letradio.com. It's free. It's always been free, and it costs you absolutely nothing. There's no hidden tricks. letradio.com. Check it out today. You can find episodes of the show as available as a podcast after airing on radio. They're always free, always have been, and always will be. Again, that's letradio.com, where it's always free. Back to our conversation with Stacey Goodman, joining us from Arizona. She's a retired Suffolk County, New York police officer with federal disaster training. She was drafted, that's the term we use, to work with the federal government at the 9/11 World Trade Center disaster, the terror attack, and also TWA Flight 800 disaster. She wrote a book called The Dust Never Settles. Get details about the book at StaceyGoodmanBook.com. This is Law Enforcement Today Show. Stacey, I really appreciate you coming on and talking about this. Before we went to break, you talked about you said 6-year officer, and you're still kind of young, and all of a sudden you're a federal agent temporarily, and you are in charge of lieutenants. I'm sure that was quite awkward for you. I'm sure it was quite awkward for them, but they eventually got the hang of it, didn't they?
Yeah, it wasn't like I was bossing them around. We all had a good chuckle. Yeah, they put a city lieutenant under my command, basically to assist me in whatever I needed to better help the medical examiner and the team.
I wish
and the
you had
medical
videos
staff.
of that. I'm sure it was fun at the very beginning.
It was one of the lighter points in that whole situation.
I'm glad you used the term lighter because so much of it's heavy duty, and there's really no way of escaping it. It's, look, you said 1.8 million tons of debris, and in that rubble were bodies and human remains and parts of bodies of people that didn't survive. And your task was to identify and log these body parts and these people. You and I both know that with decomposing bodies, it's tough. It's really, really tough. The odor itself, I don't know how you dealt with it.
Well, that was interesting. I found out very early on in my career that those smells didn't affect me as much as they affected some of the other people. That I learned after Flight 800, being around those remains that were in water for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks
Enough
before
said
they were
on that
covered.
one. Yeah, that's really bad.
Yeah, and I found out the smell didn't bother me as much as it bothered some of the other people. So I guess that's a gift, a curse. I don't know what you'd call it, but it didn't affect me as much as it did some of the other people.
I'd say that was probably a blessing, consider what you had to do. And one of the things I want to focus on, the investigation part of it, I quite honestly, I believe a lot of that will bore people to tears. What they don't understand and what they don't hear about is how do you preserve the dignity for the human remains when you're doing that. There must have been some, for both incidents, some measures you all took to try to make it as dignified as possible.
Yeah, and when remains were brought in, they were handled with the utmost respect by the fire department, the police department, and the other workers that were working on the pile. So by the time they were brought to me, they were brought on, a table, or they were placed on a table from a rescue bucket, and we continued what they started by treating the bodies with respect. And that's this goes back to what I was saying before about how when you're seeing an autopsy or when you're with the medical examiner, he's a doctor and he's treating these bodies with the utmost respect. I think we got away recently from appreciating medical professionals to some degree, but the medical examiner, even though he's at a different point, he's treating the body at a different point in life, and he's still doing it with the utmost respect. That being said, what had to happen is when they first brought the remains in, the medical examiner looked at me and he's like, "Well, you're going to have to do preliminary IDs. This is a federal crime scene, and you're a temporary federal agent." So that's when it was like somebody slapping me across the face. Like now I had this tremendous responsibility placed upon me, and I was up for the task, but that really weighed on me. The importance of what I was doing, and trying to get it as perfect as I possibly could. So I ended up doing preliminary IDs, which started out with, do they have ID on them, and can we read that ID? Because basically at the time they were just going to do DNA comparisons because we didn't know how the bodies were going to be presented.
Right.
So we did preliminary IDs. That there was somebody there doing very detailed notes. I would tell the medical examiner if there was ID, and then he would dictate it to the individual police officer that was making notations. on what the preliminary ID was, and then the remains would be sent to the New York City Medical Examiner office for actual identification based off of our preliminary ID. What they could do is say, okay, if this is John Smith, let me go to John Smith's family. Do you have a toothbrush,
Right.
a hairbrush, anything with DNA on it? And as you know, 20 years ago, DNA was not as good as it is now. And as a matter of fact, a little point, on the 20th anniversary, they actually matched DNA to 2 more victims. And they're still trying to find every single last victim.
Not everybody's been
day.
identified. And here's one of the things that I've, 2 things actually. Number one, I don't think you ever thought in your life that I'd be doing this and preparing yourself for it. I don't think there's a way to do it. Secondly, and this is the most important, in my opinion, so many people were like, they don't care. They're not letting us know. They're withholding information. And it's like, it's a slow, tedious process. It's an emotional process. It's hard on the first responders that are there. How did you deal with that?
Well, basically, when I was down there, I didn't, because there was no time. There really was no time. It was 12 hours of work. Then they would shuttle you back. We were fortunate enough to be staying in hotels because after this happened, people fled New York. They couldn't fly, so they rented cars, and they went back home. They knew they were going to need extra time to get home. So the hotels were open, and the federal government put us up in one of the local hotels. So basically, we would once we were shuttled back after our shift was over, we would get debriefed, and then we would have breakfast with our unit, and then basically I just went back to my room, showered, and went to sleep.
And I'm not going to ask you how you deal with the conspiracy theorists on that, because I already know your answer, which I think is phenomenal. I want to shift gears to, you decided to write a book about this. It's called The Dust Never Settles. If people get more information, your website, StaceyGoodmanBook.com. That's STACEY, GoodmanBook.com. How long did it take you to write the book?
10 years. I wanted to have it out for the 10th anniversary. Everybody kept saying, write a book. You have a very interesting life, not just your law enforcement career, but all this other stuff you've been through. So I would start, I handwrote a lot of it. I would write something and then it would hit me. When I put it down on paper, when it became physical, when I was looking at it, it was an emotional drain. So I would put it away. I wouldn't touch it for another month or so. Then I would take it out and do some more. And when I wanted to have it out for the 20th anniversary, and I knew nothing about publishing a book or anything like that. So I found a local guy who's he's an author himself. He's an editor. He's a webmaster. He's does it all. So I hired him to take my he laughed at me, but I told him I don't like computers. He took all my pages, all my handwritten pages, and there was a stack of them. He converted it onto a computer, and he dealt with all the publishing issues because I don't know anything about that. And then he designed my webpage and got that all going.
And that's StaceyGoodmanBook.com. And we're almost out of time. Stacey, it's so much more than just your book. You've got your story, and you do speaking. Can people contact you through your website?
Yes, they can contact me through the website. They can send me an email, and I'm more than happy to do speaking engagements. And if they want to purchase a book, I would strongly suggest they do it through my website. And if they purchase a copy directly through my secure website, through PayPal, I will send them a signed copy of my book.
Stacey, I want to thank you so much for your service and really for telling your story on a Law Enforcement Show. All very much appreciated.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
This was the podcast version of the nationally syndicated Law Enforcement Talk radio show, and we are so glad that you decided to join us. Big thanks to our guests for telling their story on the show. 2 simple things you can do. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com. That's letradio.com. And be sure to follow us or like us on Facebook. Do a search on Facebook for Law Enforcement Talk radio show. And Be sure when you see a post that we put up that you like, that you resonate with, that gets your attention, be sure to share it with your friends. Back in just a few days, another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and Podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.